Blood dripped onto the snow, my lungs burning as the hounds howled behind me. I had just done the unthinkable. I rejected my alpha. But as the ancient cursed pines closed in and glowing golden eyes pierced the dark, I realized I hadn't run to freedom. I had run straight into the Lycan King's domain. The great hall of the Iron Fang Keep was suffocatingly warm, thick with the scent of roasting meat, pine needles, and the oppressive musk of 100 subservient wolves. I stood near the massive stone hearth, my hands trembling beneath the heavy velvet of my ceremonial gown. Tonight was the winter solstice, the night I was to be officially claimed. My name is Genevieve. For 3 years I had been the captive prize of Alpha Alaric. To the outside world, and even to the lower-ranking members of the pack, Alaric was a visionary leader, a strong, charismatic lord who had unified the northern territories. But behind the heavy oak doors of our private chambers, he was a monster. He thrived on control, isolating me from my friends, gaslighting me until I doubted my own memories, and using his alpha command to force me to my knees whenever my spirit flared. The bruises on my ribs, hidden beneath the tight lacing of my bodice, were a fresh reminder of a minor infraction from the day before I had spoken to a stable boy without his permission. "Smile, Genevieve." A harsh whisper grazed my ear. Alaric's hand clamped down on my waist, his fingers digging painfully into the bruised flesh. "The entire pack is watching. Do not make me discipline you on our mating night." I forced the corners of my mouth to lift. "Yes, Alaric." "Alpha Alaric," he corrected smoothly, taking a sip from his silver goblet. "Never forget what you owe me. Without me, you are a rogue, a beggar." The drums began to beat, a slow, rhythmic pounding that echoed the frantic hammering of my heart. The elders of the pack, dressed in cloaks of white wolf fur, stepped into the center of the hall. It was time. Once his mark was on my neck, the bond would be complete, and my soul would be tethered to his until death. I would never escape. The thought of his teeth breaking my skin, injecting his venom and his absolute authority into my veins, made bile rise in my throat. As Alaric led me to the center of the room, the crowd parted, bowing their heads in reverence. I caught the eye of Beatrice, the pack's healer, and the only person who knew the truth of my torments. Her eyes were wide, brimming with tears. She gave me a microscopic nod. She had left the postern gate unlocked just as we had planned, though neither of us truly believed I would have the courage to run. Alaric turned to me, his chest puffed out with arrogant pride. "Before the goddess and the pack, I claim Genevieve of the Oakhaven bloodline as my Luna." He reached for me, his eyes flashing to their dominant amber. The command in his aura hit me like a physical weight, forcing my knees to buckle. He wanted me to submit in front of everyone. He wanted me broken. As I hit the cold stone floor, a sudden blinding clarity washed over me. I remembered my mother's voice, telling me about the pride of our ancestors. I remembered the pain of Alaric's fists, the coldness of his eyes, the absolute terror of my existence. If I accepted his bite, I was dead anyway. I pushed myself up. My legs shook, but I stood tall, locking eyes with him. Alaric's smirk faltered. "Kneel, Genevieve." He growled the alpha command, lacing his voice, heavy enough to make the surrounding wolves whimper and drop to the ground. But the goddess gives a mate one ultimate defense, a right of refusal that not even an alpha can override. "No," I whispered. The great hall fell deadly silent. The crackling of the hearth fire sounded like roaring thunder. "What did you say?" Alaric stepped forward, his face contorting into a mask of pure rage. I took a deep breath, drawing on every ounce of strength left in my battered soul. I projected my voice so every wolf in the keep would hear my defiance. I, Genevieve, reject you, Alpha Alaric, as my mate and my alpha. The words tore from my throat, followed instantly by an agonizing, tearing sensation in my chest. It felt as though a hot blade had been driven through my heart. The mating bond, though incomplete, was snapping. Alaric stumbled backward, a guttural scream erupting from his lips as the rejection struck him. The pain of a rejected alpha is catastrophic, a sudden severing of dominance and soul. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest, his eyes rolling back. "Seize her!" roared Gregory Alaric, second in command, drawing his broadsword. I didn't hesitate. I hiked up my heavy velvet skirts and bolted. I shoved past the bewildered elders, sprinting down the dimly lit stone corridor toward the kitchens. Behind me, the great hall erupted into chaos. Wolves were shifting their bones, cracking and reshaping as they gave chase. I burst through the kitchen doors, startling the cooks, and threw myself against the heavy oak of the postern gate. Beatrice had been true to her word. The iron latch was undone. I slipped out into the freezing, howling blizzard of the winter solstice. I was completely alone, armed with nothing but the clothes on my back, running into the deadly wilderness of the northern mountains. But for the first time in 3 years, I was free. The snow was thigh-deep, turning every step into a grueling battle. The velvet gown, once a symbol of my high status, was now a freezing, heavy trap, clinging to my legs. I had torn off the sleeves to bandage my bleeding feet after losing my slippers in the first mile, but the frostbite was already setting in. Behind me, the sound of the hunt echoed through the skeletal trees. Alaric had recovered enough to send his trackers. I could hear the deep, baying howls of the war hounds and the frantic yelping of his fastest wolves. Leading them was Cedric, the pack's headhunter, a man whose cruelty rivaled Alaric's own. I knew what would happen if they caught me. Rejection was an act of treason. They would drag me back by my hair, and Alaric would execute me in the courtyard to restore his bruised ego. I pushed harder, my lungs burning with the icy air. My vision was blurring, the edges of the world turning dark and fuzzy. I was heading north toward the jagged peaks of the Dragon-Tooth Mountains. I had a desperate, suicidal plan. At the base of the mountains lay the Weeping Gorge, a massive ravine that served as the absolute border of Iron Fang territory. Beyond it lay the Forbidden Lands. No one went there. It was the ancestral territory of the Lycans, the ancient pure-blood ancestors of modern werewolves. They were larger, faster, and infinitely more brutal. They didn't have packs, they had a kingdom, and their king, a warlord of myth and nightmare, suffered no trespassers. To cross the bridge into his territory was an automatic death sentence. But a quick death at the claws of a Lycan was a mercy compared to what Alaric had planned for me. The trees suddenly parted, revealing the precipice of the Weeping Gorge. A rickety ancient rope bridge encased in ice spanned the terrifying drop into darkness. I scrambled onto the bridge just as a massive grey wolf, Cedric, burst from the tree line, followed by half a dozen others. They skidded to a halt at the edge of the gorge. Cedric shifted back to his human form, naked and steaming in the cold. He looked at the bridge, then at the dark, imposing pine forest on the other side. Fear flashed in his eyes. "Genevieve," he roared over the howling wind. "Come back! If you cross that line, we cannot save you. The Lycans will tear you to shreds. I'd rather be dead than go back to him." I screamed back, the wind whipping my frozen hair across my face. I didn't wait to see if he would follow. I turned and ran across the treacherous swaying bridge, the wooden planks groaning under my weight. When my feet hit the solid, snow-covered earth on the other side, I expected Cedric to pursue. But when I looked back, the Iron Fang wolves were pacing anxiously at the border, whining. They wouldn't dare take a single step onto Lycan soil. I had survived Alaric, but as the adrenaline began to fade, the sheer absolute cold took its place. I stumbled blindly into the dense black forest of the Forbidden Lands. The atmosphere here was entirely different. The air hummed with a primal heavy magic that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The trees were impossibly tall, blocking out the moonlight, plunging the world into an eerie twilight. My body finally gave out. My knees hit the snow, and I collapsed against the frozen roots of a giant oak tree. I couldn't feel my hands or feet anymore. A strange, peaceful warmth began to spread through my chest, the final stage of freezing to death. I closed my eyes, grateful that I was dying a free woman. Crunch. My eyes snapped open. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of heavy footsteps in the snow. Out of the darkness, shadows began to detach themselves from the trees. They weren't just wolves. They were behemoths, standing nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder, with thick, matted fur black as pitch, and eyes that burned like liquid silver. 3 Lycans surrounded me. They didn't growl. They didn't snarl. They simply stared at me with an terrifying, intelligent silence. I was too weak to even scream. I simply waited for the end. Then the 3 massive beasts parted, lowering their massive heads in submission. A man walked through the clearing. He wasn't shifted, though the freezing temperature seemed to have no effect on him. He was dressed in dark leather and chainmail, a heavy cloak of bare fur draped over broad, imposing shoulders. His face was rugged, aristocratic, and marked by a vicious, faded scar that ran from his left temple down to his jawline. His eyes were the color of a stormy sea. He stopped a few feet from me, looking down at my pathetic, half-frozen form. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. "Ironfang scent," he murmured, his voice, a deep, gravelly baritone that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. "But it is broken, tainted with blood and a fresh severing." He crouched down, bringing his face level with mine. I tried to flinch away, but my muscles were paralyzed. "Why has an Ironfang female crossed into my kingdom smelling of rejected bonds and death?" he asked. I swallowed hard, my lips cracked and bleeding. I ran," I rasped. "My alpha, I rejected him." The man's stormy eyes locked onto the bruises, peeking out from the torn neckline of my dress. A flash of something dangerous and dark crossed his features. He reached out a large, calloused hand. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting a fatal blow. Instead, he gently scooped me up into his arms as easily as if I were a child. The heat radiating from his body was intoxicating, instantly searing away the frost on my skin. "You are a long way from home, little wolf," he said softly. Who are you?" I managed to whisper, resting my heavy head against his armored chest. "I am King Tristan," he replied, turning to carry me deeper into the shadows of his impenetrable domain. "And you, Genevieve, are no longer Alaric's problem. You are mine." Before I could process the fact that the Lycan King himself knew my name, the darkness claimed me, and I finally passed out. I woke to the smell of burning cedar and roasted pheasant. For a disorienting moment, panic seized my chest. I expected to feel the cold, damp stone of my cell in Ironfang Keep, or the brutal, bruising grip of Alaric's hands. Instead, my fingers brushed against the softest spun silk I had ever felt. My eyes fluttered open. I was lying in a massive 4-poster bed draped in crimson velvet. The room was cavernous, built from smooth, dark, volcanic stone that seemed to absorb the dancing light of a roaring hearth. Large arched windows looked out over a breathtaking vista, snow-capped mountains piercing the clouds, and a sprawling fortified city carved directly into the rock face. This was the obsidian citadel. "You are awake," I gasped, pulling the thick fur blanket up to my chin. Sitting in a high-backed leather chair near the fire was a woman. She possessed the same towering, intimidating stature as the lichens in the forest, but her face was kind, framed by a cascade of auburn hair. "Do not fear, child," she said gently, pouring a steaming cup of tea from a silver pot. "I am Lady Clara of the Belmont estate. The king assigned me to your care. You have been asleep for 3 days. The frostbite nearly claimed your limbs, but your healing factor. It is unusually strong for a standard wolf." I accepted the tea, my hands shaking. 3 days, but Alaric, the Iron Fang pack. They do not cross the Weeping Gorge. Clara said, a hint of a proud smirk playing on her lips. Even a mad dog knows better than to step into a dragon's den. "Drink. King Tristan has requested your presence in his solar once you are strong enough." It took an hour to bathe and dress. Clara provided me with clothes befitting a noblewoman, a gown of deep sapphire wool embroidered with silver threads and soft leather boots that accommodated my tender, healing feet. When I finally walked out of the bedchamber, escorted by 2 silent, hulking Lycan guards, my heart hammered against my ribs. I had traded a tyrant for a monster of myth. What did King Tristan want with me? His solar was an expansive library walls lined with ancient leather-bound tomes. Tristan stood by a massive mahogany desk, poring over a map. Without his heavy winter cloak, his physique was even more imposing. He wore a simple linen tunic that clung to the heavily corded muscles of his chest and arms, and black leather breeches. As I entered, he looked up, those stormy sea eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Leave us," he commanded the guards. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me. "Genevieve," he said, testing the syllables of my name as if tasting a fine wine. "You look much better without the pallor of death on your skin." I curtsied stiffly, my survival instincts warring with my pride. "Thank you for saving my life, Your Majesty. But I must ask, how did you know my name? I am no one. Just a captive of the Iron Fang." Tristan scoffed a deep, rumbling sound. He slowly walked around his desk, closing the distance between us. The primal energy rolling off him was intoxicating, a sharp contrast to the suffocating dominance Alaric always projected. Tristan's aura didn't force me to my knees. It grounded me, making me feel strangely anchored. "You are not a no-one, Genevieve," he said softly, stopping mere inches from me. He reached out his large, calloused fingers, gently tilting my chin up so I was forced to look at him. "Your mother was Lady Josephine of the House of Laurent. Does that name mean nothing to you?" I blinked, stunned. My mother was Josephine Oakhaven. She was a healer. She died when I was young. "Oakhaven was a disguise." Tristan corrected his thumb, lightly brushing the line of my jaw. "The House of Laurent was one of the oldest Lycan bloodlines in this kingdom. Your mother fled the Obsidian Citadel 20 years ago during the Blood Rebellions to avoid a forced political marriage. She crossed the border and hid among the lesser wolves. You are not just a werewolf, Genevieve. You are half Lycan." The room seemed to spin. Half Lycan. It made an agonizing amount of sense. It explained why Alaric, a man obsessed with power, had kept me locked away, forcing me into a mating ritual, rather than just taking me as a bed warmer. He wanted my bloodline to breed a superior heir. It also explained how I had survived the soul-tearing agony of rejecting an alpha. A pure werewolf would have died from the shock. "Alaric knew," I whispered, the betrayal stinging my eyes. "He knew what I was." He did, Tristan growled, his eyes flashing silver. And he sought to cage a creature meant to run free, but he will never touch you again. Before I could process his promise, a frantic knock echoed through the room. The doors flew open, and a tall, wiry Lycan with a scarred lip entered, bowing hastily. "My king, forgive the intrusion, but we have an envoy at the bridge, Ambassador Reginald from the Ironfang pack. He waves a banner of truce and carries a message from Alpha Alaric." Tristan's jaw clenched. "Bring him to the Great Hall. Let us hear what the lapdog has to say." The Great Hall of the Obsidian Citadel was a masterpiece of intimidation. Dozens of Lycan lords and ladies stood by, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. I stood behind Tristan's massive throne of carved bone and iron. Ambassador Reginald, a slick weasel-like man I recognized as Alaric's chief diplomat, strode into the hall. He tried to mask his terror, but the stench of his fear sweat reached my nose easily. "King Tristan," Reginald announced, his voice trembling slightly. "I bring greetings from Alpha Alaric of the Unified Northern Pax. I come to reclaim stolen property, the female Genevieve. She is an escaped criminal, guilty of treason and attempted murder of her alpha." A low collective growl echoed through the hall. The sheer volume of it made the stone pillars vibrate. Tristan did not raise his voice, but it commanded the room effortlessly. "Genevieve is not property, Ambassador. She is of the House of Laurent. She is Lycan blood, and she is under my absolute protection." Reginald paled but held his ground. "Alpha Alaric will not accept this. He views your harboring of this traitor as an act of war. If she is not returned by the next full moon, he will march his armies to your border." Tristan stood up slowly. He descended the dais, each step deliberate, until he towered over the shivering ambassador. "Tell Alaric," Tristan said, his voice dropping to a lethal, monstrous purr, "that if he steps 1 foot onto my soil, I will not just slaughter his army. I will personally rip his spine from his body and mount his skull on my gates. Now run back to your master before I decide I am hungry." Reginald didn't wait. He turned and fled the hall, the door slamming behind him. Tristan turned back to look at me. The political mask vanished, replaced by a raw, burning intensity. In that moment, as our eyes locked across the cavernous room, the air between us crackled. The empty, torn space in my chest where Alaric's bond had been suddenly flared with a new, blinding heat. The goddess hadn't just given me the strength to reject Alaric. She had pushed me toward my true fate. Tristan was my true mate. The revelation of the mate bond changed everything. The following weeks in the Obsidian Citadel were a whirlwind of healing and discovery. Tristan didn't force the bond. Unlike Alaric, who demanded submission, Tristan offered partnership. He trained with me in the snowy courtyards, teaching me to harness the dormant Lycan strength in my veins. My senses sharpened, my speed doubled, and the timid, abused girl from Ironfang Keep slowly died, replaced by a woman who could hold her own against the fiercest warriors in the citadel. But peace is a fragile illusion. The full moon was approaching, bringing with it the blood moon eclipse, a night when pack magic is at its most volatile. We thought the Weeping Gorge was impenetrable. We were wrong. It was Lord Percival of the Black-Crested Valley who betrayed us. Percival was a traditionalist, a Lycan lord who despised Tristan for bringing a mutt into the citadel. He secretly despised the king's modern ruling methods and craved the throne for himself. 3 days before the eclipse, Percival disabled the ancient runic wards guarding the secret mountain pass, known as the Serpent's Spine, allowing Alaric's elite vanguard to bypass the bridge entirely. The attack came at midnight. I was in the library reading through my mother's old journals when the alarm bells began to toll a frantic, deafening clang of iron that shattered the quiet of the night. Shouts and the sounds of clashing steel echoed from the lower courtyards. I sprinted to the window. Below, the snow was stained red. Iron Fang wolves, bulked up on some sort of dark alchemical enhancement, were swarming the gates, clashing with the Lycan guards. The door to the library burst open. I spun around instinctively, dropping into a defensive crouch. It wasn't Tristan. It was Alaric. He looked deranged. His usually immaculate hair was wild, his eyes completely subsumed by a toxic glowing amber. He held a massive broadsword dripping with dark blood. Behind him stood Lord Percival, smirking. "Hello, little bird," Alaric rasped, wiping blood from his cheek. "Did you really think a river and a few overgrown dogs could keep you from me?" "You're trespassing, Alaric." I said, my voice steady. I was amazed at my own calm. 3 months ago, I would have been on my knees, sobbing. Now I only felt a cold, calculated fury. "Percival was kind enough to open the back door," Alaric sneered, stepping into the room. "The king is busy fighting my vanguard at the main gates. By the time he realizes you're gone, we will be miles away. And when we return to Iron Fang, I will chain you to my bed until you break." He lunged forward, tossing the broadsword aside, aiming to grab me by the throat just as he used to. But I wasn't the same Genevieve. As his hand shot out, I sidestepped with blinding speed. I grabbed his wrist, using his own momentum to twist his arm behind his back. The sickening crack of his shoulder dislocating echoed in the room. Alaric screamed, a pathetic high-pitched sound. "What is this?" Percival snarled, drawing his own blade. "She is a freak. Kill her." Before Percival could take a step, the stained glass window of the library shattered inward in a spectacular explosion of glass and splintered wood. A massive, pure black wolf, larger than a draft horse, crashed into the room. It was Tristan fully shifted into his Lycan form. He didn't even pause. Tristan hit Percival like a battering ram, his massive jaws snapping closed around the traitorous lord's throat. With one violent shake of his head, the threat of Lord Percival was ended. Tristan dropped the body, his silver eyes locking onto Alaric. A deep, rumbling growl shook the dust from the rafters. Alaric scrambled backward, clutching his broken arm, his arrogant facade completely shattered. He looked at me then, at the monstrous Lycan King standing protectively in front of me. "Genevieve, please," Alaric begged, his voice cracking. The great Alpha of the North was crying. "Call him off. I'll leave. I'll never bother you again." Tristan stepped forward, ready to tear the man apart. But I placed a hand on his massive, fur-covered shoulder. "No, Tristan," I said softly. Tristan paused, looking down at me, his silver eyes questioning. "He is mine," I said. I walked past Tristan, standing over the pathetic, sniveling man who had stolen 3 years of my life. I didn't need claws or fangs to destroy him. I just needed him to understand exactly what he had lost and exactly what I had become. "You called me a beggar," I said, my voice echoing in the ruined library. "You said I was nothing without you. But you were wrong, Alaric. You were nothing but a stepping stone to my true destiny." I knelt down, grabbing him by the collar of his expensive tunic, pulling his terrified face close to mine. "I am Genevieve of the House of Laurent. I am half Lycan, and I am the true mate of King Tristan. I let the power of my bloodline bleed into my voice, an alpha command of my own, fueled by ancient Lycan magic. I strip you of your alpha title. I banish you from these lands. If you ever show your face in the north again, I will not let my mate kill you. I will do it myself." I shoved him backward. He scrambled to his feet, slipping in the blood on the floor, and bolted for the door, a broken, disgraced man. Without an alpha title, his pack would turn on him, the moment he returned. He was as good as dead. I stood up, taking a deep breath of the cold winter air, rushing in through the broken window. The battle outside was quieting down. The Iron Fang vanguard, sensing their alpha's cowardice and defeat, were surrendering or fleeing. Tristan shifted back to his human form, ignoring his own nakedness as he wrapped his arms around me from behind, burying his face in my neck. His skin was blazing hot, comforting, and safe. "You let him live," Tristan murmured, his lips brushing against my ear. "Death is too easy for a man like Alaric," I replied, leaning back against his broad chest. "Let him live as a rogue. Let him live with the knowledge that the woman he tried to break is the one who broke him." Tristan chuckled a deep, vibrating sound that sent shivers down my spine. He turned me around, framing my face with his large hands. "You are magnificent," he said, his stormy eyes filled with absolute adoration. "My beautiful, terrifying mate. My queen." He leaned down, and as his lips met mine, the mate bond snapped fully into place. It wasn't a tether of pain and control like Alaric's. It was a bridge of golden light connecting two souls in perfect equal harmony. I had run into the deadly frozen wilderness expecting to die. Instead, I found a kingdom, a bloodline I never knew I had, and a love that would burn for eternity. The abused captive of the Iron Fang Keep was dead. Long live Queen Genevieve of the Obsidian Citadel. Did Genevieve's journey from a broken captive to the powerful Lycan Queen leave you breathless? The Obsidian Citadel has many more secrets, and King Tristan's enemies are always lurking in the shadows. If you loved this epic tale of betrayal, destiny, and true mate romance, please hit that like button, share this video with your fellow werewolf drama fans, and subscribe so you never miss another thrilling story.